With the NBA Finals nearing their conclusion, the rest of the league have already turned their attention to what's coming next. And for a lot of teams, that means one thing: making a move, and maybe multiple. The Orlando Magic already made waves by trading for Desmond Bane during these finals, showing they're not wasting any time. But beyond that, there are three massive questions that are still looming this NBA offseason, and many NBA insiders believe that this offseason could be one of the most active in league history. Let's start off with question number one. Where is Kevin Durant going? After 2.5 seasons in Phoenix, it became clear that the Suns' experiment with Durant has run its course. They began this season on fire, going 8-1, only to completely collapse and miss even the play-in tournament, finishing with just 36 wins and the 11th seed in the Western Conference. When you have Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal all on the same team, and you still can't crack even the play-in tournament, that's about as definite of a failure as you could possibly get. Durant, now 36 and inching closer to the end of his Hall of Fame career, has been made available in trade talks. And adding fuel to the fire, he even gave the Suns a list of his preferred trade destinations. That list included the Houston Rockets and San Antonio Spurs, both young and talented teams based in his home state of Texas. The Spurs were one of the first teams that were linked to Kevin Durant, but that interest quickly hit a wall. According to reports from Kirk Goldsberry, Phoenix asked San Antonio for the 2nd overall pick or Stefan Castle if a deal with Kevin Durant was going to be done. But the Spurs wisely have no plans to go all in just yet. Per Shams Charania, they aren't pursuing Durant aggressively, seeing him as a poor fit to their timeline. Victor Wembanyama is still very early into his career, and Stefan Castle looks like a great foundational piece as well. Trading either of them for a 37-year-old, even as one as great as Kevin Durant, just does not make sense. Sure, a Durant-Wemby pairing would be box office. There's no denying the on-court potential, but the long-term risk far outweighs the short-term reward. The Spurs seem committed to building something sustainable, and personally, I believe they are making the right call. Houston is in a very similar boat. They reportedly made a firm offer for Durant, but Phoenix wasn't impressed. Like the Spurs, the Rockets are also a young team trying to build a cohesive defensive-first identity under coach Ime Udoka. They've seen major promise from Amen Thompson, and they believe he might be their franchise cornerstone. They're not interested in throwing off their development curve by trading away key pieces like Jalen Green, Alperen Şengün, or Atari Eason just to give themselves one crack at the title when they could build a wider window later down the track. As much as they'd love to have Durant for the next couple of seasons, they just aren't willing to give up their future to make it happen. And that's really the core issue for both Texas teams. Phoenix wants a lot, and neither of them are willing to pay the price. So that opens up the door for a potential dark horse team to swoop in, just like Milwaukee did out of nowhere with the Damian Lillard sweepstakes, and snatch him for their own. One team to keep an eye on was the New York Knicks. Mark J. Spears reported that KD had them on his list as well, but unfortunately for Durant and the Suns, New York have made it crystal clear that they aren't trading for him. Again, the timeline would seem to be the issue. Despite being older, giving up so much for a guy who is close to the end of his career just doesn't seem to be a smart move. The Miami Heat are another team that often get brought up in these conversations as well, and that's mainly because of the destination. But the challenge with the Heat is that they just simply don't have much to offer. Their draft picks lack value since Miami always find a way to be in the playoff conversation, and most of their current players just aren't enticing enough for Phoenix to say yes to in a deal for Durant. If the Suns are being asked to accept a package headlined by Duncan Robinson and Andrew Wiggins, it's hard to blame them for passing up that deal. Miami might love the idea of a Kevin Durant, Bam Adebayo, and Tyler Hero trio, especially with the layout of the Eastern Conference after the Celtics going down and all of the issues the Milwaukee Bucks have been having too, but the fact of the matter is, they don't have the assets to get it done. That brings us to the Minnesota Timberwolves, and in my opinion, this is where things truly get interesting. The Timberwolves had serious serious discussions with Phoenix before the trade deadline in February, and recently, those talks picked back up. Back then, they believed Durant was open to coming to Minnesota, and there's a lot of reason to think he'd fit well. The friendship between Anthony Edwards and Kevin Durant is well documented, and KD has long-standing ties with Timberwolves president Mike Conley, who also comes from the DC area. The basketball fit just makes too much sense. Durant could slide in next to Jaden McDaniels, whose elite defense would let Kevin Durant focus more on scoring and less on defensive assignments. Now, more recently, sources say Durant's preference has shifted more towards San Antonio. That doesn't necessarily kill a Minnesota deal though. We've seen teams take the gamble anyway. Remember back to when Toronto traded for Kawhi Leonard, even though he clearly wanted to go to LA. That gamble paid off with a championship, even if Kawhi left a year later. And while KD's age might seem like a risk, I just don't think it's even the same concern. He just wants to go hoop, and if Minnesota offers him the kind of structure and stardom that lets him do exactly that, with Anthony Edwards firmly established as the face of the franchise and the kind of magnetic personality who's going to draw all of the spotlight, Durant could just show up and play, which he's always claimed to prefer. On top of that, the Timberwolves are right here. Back-to-back Western Conference Finals appearances, a loaded defense, and a need for one more scorer to potentially break through. So realistically, Kevin Durant could be the final piece. Financially, it would be tricky. They just traded Cat to the Knicks, which got them under the second apron, increasing their flexibility, but the pieces might still align. A potential deal could involve a combination of Julius Randle, Rudy Gobert, and Dante DiVincenzo, players who could all help Phoenix stay competitive right now. And yes, with Gobert, he's obviously a massive part of Minnesota's defense, so giving him up would be tough, especially if Durant isn't 100% sold on sticking around. But if Phoenix believes in the value of staying in the playoff mix rather than fully rebuilding, this could be one of the more balanced trade packages they're going to see. So when it's all said and done, there's so many directions that this could go. Right now, the Suns front office are weighing up all of the options and are probably hoping for a surprise suitor to emerge, giving them exactly what they want. But for right now, I think Minnesota makes the most sense for both sides. And honestly, it's the landing spot that I would be the most excited to see. Now, the second major question for this offseason, and one that might be just as fascinating as the Kevin Durant sweepstakes, is what on earth is going on with the Dallas Mavericks. Honestly, trying to predict anything with this franchise feels like a complete waste of time, because just a few months ago, nobody could have ever imagined they'd actually trade away Luka Doncic on a random Saturday night right before the trade deadline. Yet, that is exactly what happened. It sent shockwaves through the league, and for a moment, it appeared as if they were going to be entering a very dark era of their franchise's trajectory. But then, in a fairy tale fashion, they unexpectedly got a lifeline from the draft lottery. With just a 1% chance at the number 1 overall pick, the Mavericks somehow pulled it off. Never mind how it happened. Believe me, I'm just as skeptical as anybody. But regardless, they now find themselves at a critical fork in the road. With the top pick all but certain to be used on high school phenom Cooper Flagg, Dallas suddenly has a future again. But the path forward, that is where things get tricky. You've still got Anthony Davis on the roster. Kyrie Irving is still under contract, even though he likely won't return to the court until late February or even March. So option number 1 is clear. Keep the core intact, potentially add a couple of complementary depth pieces in free agency, and aim for a deep playoff push over the next year or two. In this scenario, Flagg becomes a third option, learning from veterans such as Kyrie and AD while being brought slowly along. You keep your competitive edge, make the postseason, and try and rebuild a contender around this trio. There's an obvious upside here. The defense with Flagg and Davis could be suffocating, and if Kyrie can return and be even 80% of the guy he once was, then you've got enough offensive firepower to hang with just about anybody. But the downside is just as real. You risk stunting Flagg Flag's development by making him wait behind aging stars. And maybe that creates some tension. If he's as good as people think he is, and let's be clear, I think Cooper Flagg could be a future superstar, then you do not want to slow him down or waste his rookie contract years playing second or third fiddle. He's got the potential to lead, and it's fair to wonder if he'll get the chance in this setup. That brings us to option number 2. Go all in on a rebuild right now. Accept the reality that the Western Conference is incredibly brutal right now, and that trying to thread the needle with both young players and aging stars might only result in mediocrity. We've seen teams try the 2-timeline scenario, and average is exactly what you'd describe the results to be. Instead, I think Dallas could lean towards the future. Trade Anthony Davis while his value is still sky high, as according to Shams, after the Desmond Bane deal, there's a belief that Davis could fetch 4 or even 5 first-round picks. That's not the kind of opportunity you just brush off, especially considering AD's injury history. When you have the chance to get that much back from a player who might not be available come playoff time, you've got to take the calls and hear teams out. If Dallas were to take that route, they could surround Flagg with a young, dynamic core and build something more sustainable, something that could peak in the latter half of this decade. You'd be fast-tracking the next era of Mavericks basketball instead of trying to juggle 2 timelines and just hoping that everything clicks. Personally, I think the smartest move is to move Anthony Davis, especially if you can get a massive return. Load up on picks, collect young talent, and fully commit to building around Cooper Flagg. Because as we've seen time and time again, the 2-timeline situation basically never works. You end up stretching your assets too thin, chasing 2 different futures, and securing neither. If Dallas wants to avoid that fate, they'll have to make a bold call. And knowing the recent history of that franchise, bold calls are their speciality, and I believe they just might do so. Now, the third major question looming over the NBA this offseason is what is going to occur with the Boston Celtics. The way their season ended wasn't just surprising, it was something nobody could have ever predicted. After dominating the regular season series and sweeping the Knicks in all 4 of their matchups, the Celtics collapsed in the second round against that very same team. But just as shocking as the losses were, the biggest story wasn't even about basketball. It was the injury to Jason Tatum. Tatum tearing his Achilles in Game 4 was a brutal blow, not just to that title run, but for the entire future of the franchise. And yes, the Celtics were about to lose Game 4 anyway, so the injury was not an excuse that Boston could have used that they lost that season. But that still changes absolutely everything coming into next season. Suddenly, this isn't just a team that got upset in the postseason. It's a franchise that now has to prepare for a year without the guy that everything's built around. It's expected that Tatum will miss the majority of next season, if not the entire year. And the reality has massive ripple effects. Then there's the financial situation, which under the new CBA is a complete nightmare. Even if the Celtics don't make a single splash in free agency and opted to bring back the current roster while using their upcoming draft picks, they would be paying more than $230 million in salaries next season. That's more than $40 million above the luxury tax, and when you factor in the repeater tax penalties, the total bill for the roster could hit close to $500 million, making it the most expensive team in league history. That's simply not sustainable, and it's really not even possible. Because of that, it's pretty much a lock that at least one major piece will be traded this summer. But with Tatum sidelined and the team's title window on pause, don't be surprised if it's more than just one. If I had to make a prediction, I think there's a very real chance we see up to 3 players get moved. Let's start with the most obvious name, Jrue Holiday. Even if Boston decided to take a softer approach, Holiday is still probably going to be traded. He turns 35 years old next season, and with Tatum likely not suiting up at all, Jrue could be pushing 36 before they play their next game together. His offensive game also took a noticeable dip this past year, and he had some particularly rough stretches in the playoff series against the Knicks. However, he is still an amazing defender and a strong veteran presence. but the contract is hard to swallow. He's set to earn over $32 million next season, and with that figure just steadily increasing until 2028, that is a lot of money tied up to an aging guard whose timeline may no longer align with the rest of the team. Because of that, Holiday feels like he's almost certainly going to be on the move. Next up is Kristaps Porzingis. Now, when he's available, there's no question that he makes the Celtics even better. He put up 19.5 points, 6.8 rebounds, and 1.5 blocks per game last season, as he's been a legitimate game changer for Boston on both ends of the court. But the problem, as always, is his availability. Over 2 seasons in Boston, Porzingis already missed 65 regular season games. And once again, his body let him down in the playoffs. He just has not been able to stay healthy through a campaign. And while his talent is elite, his $30 million salary becomes a super tough pill to swallow when you consider that Tatum won't even be there next season and that Boston may be entering a transitional year. It could make more sense to move Porzingis now while his value is still relatively high and get something in return that better aligns with the future of the team. After that, it's more speculation. Names like Sam Hauser could be a trade piece depending on the kind of deal that Boston sees. And yes, there's always the lingering possibility of a Jaylen Brown haul, but I just think that still remains really unlikely. The team has made a huge commitment to Brown. I mean, he just won the Finals MVP only 2 seasons ago, and even though the rest of the NBA scoffs at that notion, the Celtics franchise obviously don't. They believe in Jaylen Brown, and because of that, it's hard to see him going anywhere. So with Holiday and Porzingis both looking like they might be out the door, at least one of them, it leaves Boston with a fascinating choice. Do they try and go more of the route of the 2020 Warriors, bottom out for a season, collect some young talent, and then recalibrate for another run? Or do they go bargain hunting, look for undervalued players who can give them real minutes next season to hopefully develop or flip later on? Either way, it feels like a reset's coming. What Boston does this offseason could swing the direction for the rest of the decade. If they handle it correctly, they could very well return to title contention a lot quicker than people realize. But if they get this wrong, it could be a complete and utter disaster. But what do you guys think? What is another major offseason question that you think absolutely needs to be answered? Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments section below.